Hello there and welcome to the Slam Jam podcast with me, David Pistansky, here on Extreme.tv. So if you haven't done so already, please take a quick moment to head over to youtube.com/Extreme Improv and smash and body slam that subscribe button. Now, we're going to be discussing today Daniel Bryan. It's been reported, I think it was Fightful.com, reports that Daniel Bryan is done with the WWE. His contract has expired after his loss to Roman Reigns on SmackDown last week. The storyline was that this was Bryan's last chance to try to beat Roman, and if he didn't, he was banned from SmackDown. And he lost. That seems to suggest, well, he's just going to pop up on Raw. Everyone knows that this is WWE, and within a few weeks or a few months, he'll be back on SmackDown anyway. But what if he's actually done with WWE? What if this is Bryan saying, do you know, I was under contract to WWE for a long time. They wouldn't let me out of my contract when I was injured and retired for a while. Then I had to fulfill my contract, and now I've fulfilled it, and I'm leaving. I'm going somewhere else. What if that is actually what has happened here with Daniel Bryan? Now, I'm going to break down my different thoughts and the different aspects and factors that go into whether or not this is what's actually happening. I think this could honestly go one of two ways. It will either be that Bryan has left the WWE, or it's that he hasn't. And I know that sounds very obvious and very silly, but I think that it's a little bit more complicated than that. I think that it's either that he has left the WWE and that he will turn up in New Japan Pro Wrestling, All Elite Wrestling potentially, AAA in Mexico, because there was this thing the other day saying about, he always wanted to wrestle at Arena Mexico. Or the alternative is that he's staying with WWE, but this is a little bit of history repeating, it's a little bit of potential hype opportunity, and it is just to swerve the fans. Let's start there. Now, for those who remember Daniel Bryan's beginnings in WWE, he was on NXT. Before NXT was its own promotion, it was like not a game show, but it was a competition where wrestlers were trying to get WWE contracts. And Bryan was on it. And people were like, but he's like the king of the indies, why is he on this? Why is his pro that he's got as a mentor The Miz? And Bryan didn't win, and when Bryan lost, and from what we understand, WWE didn't clue in all of the guys in NXT, just they don't clue in everyone over everything anyway. They allowed Daniel Bryan to feel like, yep, he was eliminated, and he even said, I think it was an interview with Matt Stryker on that show about like, wow, I don't know who this Daniel Bryan guy is, he doesn't seem very good, but Bryan Danielson will probably be fine, because obviously Daniel Bryan's real name is Bryan Danielson. And he was just seeing at that moment that it will probably be that he's going back to the Indies. Now, they decided after Wade Barrett won the NXT first year competition that it would, rather than it just be Wade Barrett gets the contract, they all get contracts. They all form what became known as the Nexus. And Daniel Bryan was fired after one appearance when they beat down everyone because he choked Justin Roberts with his tie, and that made everyone think of Chris Benoit and strangling people, and he may have spat at someone, but whatever happened, they were instructed to cause chaos. Daniel Bryan cleared what he was going to be doing, but still got fired. The audience started chanting Daniel Bryan. They wouldn't let the WWE forget that this was a huge mistake, that this wasn't fair, that they liked Bryan, and the fact that this happened made the WWE universe, the fans, like Bryan even more, because they rooted for him. It was like when Matt Hardy got unjustly fired after everything with Edge and Lita happened. The fans wouldn't let Edge or Lita be in the ring without them chanting for Matt Hardy. So eventually they had to hire Matt Hardy back just to nullify it. And look what happened there. Very quickly, the audience didn't actually super care about Matt Hardy. Obviously they do care about Matt Hardy, but they didn't cheer for him as crazy when he was actually back as they were cheering for him when he wasn't there. With Daniel Bryan, he did something which is very rare, and it was a little bit of luck, a little bit of, well, a lot of his talent, but a little bit of luck that he came across the whole Yes Chant thing, which whilst people were cheering like crazy for Daniel Bryan when he wasn't there, and they eventually brought him back and everyone was happy, when he was back, they weren't continuing that same level of cheering. And then he stumbled across this Yes, Yes, Yes chant, and with the Yes, Yes, Yes chant, it kind of made him, it made his character, it put him to a different level, because the audience wanted him to be on screen so they could chant yes. They were chanting yes and see and all this other stuff, or no even, but they did what they could. They milked this yes chant, they had it focused around Bryan, and it's still been with him to this day. But arguably, after Daniel Bryan had to retire, then he had to come back, the yes chant and the yes movement and all this was a big thing again, but it's never reached the same heights as it had before. It's been widely publicised that Daniel Bryan would have continued wrestling elsewhere when he was retired, and I say that in inverted commas. I've never quite understood why he couldn't leave. Why he couldn't leave and wrestle somewhere else, because you can't keep someone under contract for 2 or 3 years saying, well, we're just going to keep you perpetually under this contract. So they've got to be paying him something, saying that, well, you owe us so many wrestling matches. It's like, but if you won't let me wrestle, then I should be able to leave and go and wrestle somewhere else. Because this was the whole thing with Brock Lesnar. When he left, they had some clause that he's not allowed to wrestle somewhere else for 5 years or 10 years or something like this. And then he was able to say that legally you're not allowed to tell a person they're not allowed to work in their chosen profession. So then Brock was able to go wrestle somewhere else. So Daniel Bryan didn't go anywhere else. They had him as the general manager or authority figure on SmackDown. But eventually he came back. He's wrestled for the last couple of years. He's been world champion, had the organic storyline where he's a heel and the organic championship belt, one made out of like fallen oak and not leather and all this sort of stuff about Daisy the cow. He turned face again, and then he ended up main eventing WrestleMania this year. It added in a 3-way match with Edge and Roman Reigns. Now that's an interesting point, just because was adding Daniel Bryan to that match, was that to help? There was a concern over Edge's ability to carry the match? He'd just won a Royal Rumble where he'd been in there for an hour, so clearly Edge could go, and they had faith that Edge could go from before the Royal Rumble. Was Roman injured? Obviously not. Did they feel that Edge wasn't getting over with the crowds, which was crazy? How could Edge not get over with the crowds? Look at the reaction he got when he returned a year earlier. Plus, it's Edge. He's got enough credentials that WWE should have been able to trust him. So why was Daniel Bryan added to the WrestleMania main event? Potentially, it was to say to Daniel Bryan, hey, we're coming up on your contract. We want you to stay. We still see you as a WrestleMania main event player. Obviously, he WrestleMania main evented WrestleMania 30. And hasn't since. Now, obviously, that includes 2 or 3 years of his retirement. But he wasn't given a WrestleMania main event that next year or the year after. And he wasn't given a WrestleMania main event when he first came back for the last couple of years. So why give him a WrestleMania main event when his contract is about to expire? Was this them saying to him, we want you to stay? Please stay, we've just had you main event WrestleMania. If he'd won the match at WrestleMania, then maybe he would have stayed. Maybe they offered for him to win if he would stay, but he still didn't stay. Maybe it's a case that he really does just have other things he wants to do in his career. We've heard Daniel Bryan say in an interview recently that he didn't feel quite as impassioned about the WrestleMania main event this year, and it made him start to question himself. Was this just Daniel Bryan speaking honestly, or was this just planting a seed for this storyline so that when people hear that Daniel Bryan's contract has ended, we all just believe it? Now, I don't know either way, but I'm trying to just join the dots between the evidence, see what the arguments say. So, another factor. This year, the Bella twins were inducted into the Hall of Fame. And obviously, you know what, I can't even remember now, but he's Brie Bella. I think it's Brie Bella rather than Nikki Bella. Daniel Bryan's married to Brie Bella, I believe. If it is Nikki Bella, I apologise for muddling them up. They haven't been on TV much that I've watched over the last few years, except for if they still do Total Bellas. But if they still are connected to WWE in that they're in the Hall of Fame, and the Total Bellas show is still a thing, and they still obviously have got a lot of links to WWE. That would be weird for Daniel Bryan to then leave WWE, because it's not just him, it's his wife. But what happens if it is just that Daniel Bryan says, look, I've only got a year or 2 or 3 years left to be able to do this. Let me take, because obviously concussions, he might have had more injuries recently and just be struggling through to get to the end. And this might just literally be it. He may just be retiring. If he's got injuries, it may be him retiring. But if he still just does have his bucket list, he might say, look, I love the WWE, but I want to wrestle at the Tokyo Dome. I want to wrestle at Arena Mexico. I want to just do a couple of these things. Let me just go and do these. Is he therefore going to go to AEW? Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe it's just a case of, well, no, I just want to wrestle in Japan. I want to wrestle in Mexico. And after that, I'll come back. And maybe that could have been worked out with him still being in WWE, and maybe that has been worked out with him still being in WWE, and his contract hasn't really expired, or at least not, or it's continuing in a different way. WWE obviously have had rumours recently that they might be working with MLW, which is Major League Wrestling, if you don't know, just because the idea of, oh, well, they're not seen to work with other companies, whereas everyone else is working with everyone else, and so WWE suddenly felt the need to. Now, if AEW currently have the forbidden door opened, even just an inch, with New Japan, then would WWE also work with New Japan at the same time? It doesn't feel likely. And obviously, AAA has Kenny Omega as their mega champion, so it doesn't feel like WWE could work with AAA at the moment. So maybe this is them saying to Daniel Bryan, well, look, your contract's ending. Go do what you want to for 6 months or a year, and then come back and we'll put you in the Hall of Fame and you can have a WrestleMania retirement match next year. And it might just be that. And then everyone's still happy, you'll be an on-screen authority figure, the Bella twins will still have their show, and everyone gets their happily ever after. Would Vince McMahon, would WWE allow Daniel Bryan just to go off like this if he's wrestling for competition? Maybe, because look, Chris Jericho was just on the Stone Cold Steve Austin Broken Skull Sessions podcast interview show, and we had Steve Austin also appearing on the Dark Side of the Ring, even though he's still appearing for WWE. Steve Austin obviously isn't a full-time wrestler anymore, so maybe he can just dip in and out and do what he wants, and maybe that's why there was that leeway to have Jericho on the WWE network despite being in AEW. But it has to be said that not only did they have Jericho on that Broken Skull Sessions show, they also spoke about AEW and showed photographs which showed Chris Jericho, I think, with the AEW Championship. So the AEW Championship belt has been seen on the WWE network. So the rules are really different. The rules are very much changing. So would this just be that Daniel Bryan is leaving WWE and he's going to go to AEW? Potentially. We know, obviously, that Tony Khan has a lot of money. We know that several people have gone from WWE to AEW, and this includes, most recently, Christian. This includes Chris Jericho, Jim Ross. This obviously includes Jon Moxley, Paul White, The Big Show. Now, all of these, perhaps, other than Moxley, are people who are slightly older, slightly less used by WWE, and slightly disconnected from WWE anyway. But it's only going to be so long until the next one jumps. And that may be Daniel Bryan, and it may be that Daniel Bryan has said to WWE, look, I can't do this for much longer. I'm only going to be able to do part-time. I'm only going to be able to be this much value to you. If you're not going to use me as a main event player because of it, then give me a blessing. I'll go to AEW. They'll pay me more money than you'd be willing to, and then I'll come back. Because look at the Big Show. Apparently Vince McMahon called him and said, hey, good luck. He wasn't going to pay him and use him regularly. Not that AEW is. He's now just an announcer on the AEW Dark Elevation show. But who knows what's happening with Daniel Bryan? There's a lot of people in AEW who he's worked with before. There's going to be people that he knows well. There's Jon Moxley. There's There's Christian. Sting was in WWE at the same time as him, and there's Jim Ross. There's loads of people who could potentially say, look, you should come over here, it'll be good, you'll like it, this will be good for you, for your earnings, good for you, for your family and stuff like this, if Bryan wants to step away. Plus you can have a lot more freedom, you can stream on Twitch if you want to, you can do Cameo, you can do a YouTube show, and these things that he can't do while still in the WWE. Maybe Bryan has the idea of, like, whilst I've still got some go, whilst I still have some fuel in the tank, if injuries and concussions are perhaps creeping up on him, it's like, well, let's establish that I'm in AEW, and whilst I'm in AEW, I started a podcast, and I started a YouTube show, and I released a vegan cookbook. Maybe Daniel Bryan has all of these other plans that, whilst he's still in WWE, can't do. And maybe along the way, I'm going to go to New Japan and get a huge payday, and I will go to, my goodness, we'll talk about some of the match potential in a moment, but maybe it's going to be that he can go to Arena Mexico, work for AAA, get a big payday. Would Daniel Bryan ever go to TNA Impact Wrestling? Probably not, but with the Forbidden Door being open and AEW's biggest star being their world champion, Kenny Omega, being the TNA champion, well, I should say Impact Wrestling champion, then who knows who could turn up in Impact Wrestling. Now, there's lots of places. I mean, would he go to the NWA? Like, imagine if Daniel Bryan just said, look, okay guys, I have a plan, and this is going to be something where, look, I still love WWE, but I've got this idea for something that's going to be epic in the wrestling world. Get lots of people talking. Kenny Omega, you've gone to TNA, you've gone to AAA, you've got the AEW Championship, and you've collected all these belts. Well, how about this for an idea? I'm going to go to New Japan Pro Wrestling, wrestle Will Ospreay, it'll be the match of the year. I'll take that championship. I'll then go to NWA, I'll wrestle Nick Aldis, and I'll take the NWA championship. And then at All In 2, there will be this ultimate card that will bring together AEW, New Japan, AAA, maybe even Ring of Honor. Daniel Bryan returning to Ring of Honor takes the Ring of Honor championship. Then it's to have an all-in main event where it's Kenny Omega with the TNA, AEW, Impact, and AAA Mega Championships against Daniel Bryan with the IWGP, NWA, Ring of Honor belts. Winner takes all. There will be a champion that has all 6 world titles. Imagine that. Now that is something that is a once in a lifetime possibility. Now this could happen anyway, where Nick Aldis could suddenly go to Japan, and Nick Aldis could go to Ring of Honor and do these things, and it's not out of the realm of possibility because NWA and Ring of Honor have worked together. It's not out of the possibility that Nick Aldis could go to Japan. So this could be very possible, but why am I saying it not with Nick Aldis, but why am I saying it with Daniel Bryan? Because Daniel Bryan has the rub of just having been in the WrestleMania main event. This could be something which knocks down and flattens any forbidden doors. WWE, if they're saying about, well, we need to work with MLW, Daniel Bryan could go to MLW and take their championship too. Or Kenny Omega could. But then, just imagine of the alliance between all of these other companies, and then there's WWE on their own. WWE wouldn't be able to compete anymore. Look at the ratings, where the WWE ratings are, well, they've got 2 million viewers, and AEW's like, well, we've got 800,000, but now it's like, well, we can do 1.2 million. We can do 1 million. We can dip a little bit under. We'll see what Blood and Guts does for the ratings for AEW. But if AEW could be slightly on the rise, and with a star like Daniel Bryan joining them, it will give them a boost again. And then WWE, if they're slightly on the decline, this could be an opportunity for Daniel Bryan to think, right, I am going to make the ratings war, I am going to make the wrestling war, the Wednesday night war, the Monday night war. Every war is suddenly going to be, I'm going to be the huge difference maker at this stage. There's got to be something appealing about that as well. And also look at Daniel Bryan. He wants to have the 5-star matches. He already has, but whether or not he's given 5-star matches to his name or not, it's kind of irrelevant. Everyone knows he always has usually the best match on the card. So what are the possibilities? Like I said, he could go to the NWA, he could wrestle Nick Aldis. He could go to AEW and obviously wrestle Kenny Omega. He could go and wrestle Will Ospreay in New Japan Pro Wrestling. But let's just focus for a second on who he could fight, who he could wrestle in AEW. Now, Kenny Omega versus Daniel Bryan is obviously the big one. So that would obviously be the biggest match, which they could probably go to straight away, or they could build up to it. But realistically, I remember when Kurt Angle went to TNA, and the first match was versus Samoa Joe. Now, Samoa Joe had an undefeated streak at that stage, and then Angle beating him did harm that a little bit, but it's still only a loss to Kurt Angle. So it was like, they should have built up to this. But at the same time, it's like, well, if you're going to bring Kurt in, it's red hot. Let's put him in the most red hot match that they've potentially got. And that is exactly what they did. Daniel Bryan to AEW to fight Kenny Omega would be the hottest match they could do. They could do it once, and then they could come back to it later. AEW obviously started with Double or Nothing, which was main evented by Kenny Omega versus Chris Jericho. Jericho won, and then it did take Kenny Omega about a year to get back on top. So would that be the case of Kenny Omega losing to Daniel Bryan, then knocks Kenny Omega down irreparably? Probably not, especially if Omega is used correctly as a heel against Daniel Bryan as a babyface. A heel Kenny Omega could bounce back from a loss better than the face Kenny Omega losing to Jericho did. But who else we got? Darby Allin versus Daniel Bryan would be a very good match. It would probably be the best Darby Allin match of his career. Darby Allin is very good, but put him in the ring with Daniel Bryan and it'd probably bring out the best in him. And who else we got? Obviously, work out some sort of tag team, get him in the ring with the Young Bucks. Adam Hangman Page would be a good match against Daniel Bryan. I see their styles complementing each other a lot. There's lots and lots. Obviously, you get some tag team together, and if you've got FTR in there and Daniel Bryan, pretty sure we've seen that before, where they've been in some sort of match over the last couple of years in WWE when they were the Revival. Jericho versus Bryan will obviously still be a good match. Christopher Daniels, Daniel Bryan, that's going to go back to the Ring of Honor days, that would be good. Christian Cage versus Daniel Bryan, 99% certain we've seen it before. Again, it would be good. Cody Rhodes, Daniel Bryan, we're going to have seen that before. And I'm just trying to pick out a few here that would be good. Dustin Rhodes versus Bryan obviously would be good. Moxley and Bryan we've seen before, but it would be a good one. Jungle Boy and Bryan, he could really elevate Jungle Boy there. Lance Archer and Daniel Bryan would be good. Daniel Bryan works very good with guys who are much bigger than him, brings the best out on them. They can throw him about. He can, technically chop them down, give those kicks, work an ankle or whatever else. Luchasaurus, again, it would be interesting, but they're both faces, so perhaps not that in the immediate future. Matt Hardy, obviously good. Miro we'll have seen before. MJF and Daniel Bryan, that would be a good one. That would be one hell of a feud where they would have some great promos. Daniel Bryan is underrated as a promo, but he's very, very good. Who else have we got here? Matt Sydal, obviously, that would be a great match. Pac, we've obviously seen as Neville versus Daniel Bryan before. That would be an excellent match in AEW without any restrictions on either guy. That would be the match of the show, no doubt. Orange Cassidy versus Daniel Bryan. I'd hate to see Daniel Bryan doing the Orange Cassidy shtick. So, hopefully, if they just had a good wrestling match, perhaps it would be that there's a storyline that Daniel Bryan is like, hey, Orange Cassidy, you're seen as a joke. I'm going to bring out the best in you and you're going to have to wrestle for your life. because I'm not going to give you a choice but to do anything else. And I'm sure they'd still work in something humorous, but I'd hate to see Daniel Bryan just standing there for the kicks or whatever. Just take one kick and then slap him, chop him down. But anyway, and that's not that I've got anything against Orange Cassidy, it's just that that's what the storyline with Daniel Bryan should be. Oh my god, Pentagon Jr., Ray Phoenix Jr., not Jr., Ray Phoenix, and Penta El Zero Miedo. That would be incredible matches. There's AEW's roster, just going over it again, it's truly stacked. Sammy Guevara would have a good match. Imagine Daniel Bryan versus Sting. Now, obviously, Sting can do probably next to nothing other than cinematic matches, but what if he could? What if he's got one more to go against Daniel Bryan? Do you think Sting and The Undertaker, if they were saying, look, okay, WrestleMania main event, you could have done this year, Sting would have stayed for it, I'm sure. But anyway, so there's lots and lots of potentials for him to go against here. And obviously in the New Japan Pro Wrestling organisation, there's tons and tons of wrestlers that he could have a fantastic match with. So Will Ospreay would absolutely be the biggest one, but just having a quick look who there is, oh my god, yeah, Jay White and John Moxley, obviously, Kota Ibushi. Wow, there's loads of them who he could have great. I'm just going through some of this. So many, like, it's interesting actually just looking at the New Japan roster, just because some of these guys I don't think are particularly there. Like, it says Jericho, and obviously he's still associated, but some of these are a little bit more bit players. Same with, Takahashi, and obviously Evil. Wow, Jay Lethal. There's loads in Ring of Honor as well. So, like, Jeff Cobb. See, he's still got Liger on here. Obviously, Liger's retired now. Okada, Kenta. There's loads. Oh, it's got Marty Scurll on here, which is a little bit controversial that he's still on the website. See how that develops. Different story entirely. But the point is, NWA, who is there in NWA, like the roster? Obviously, Aaron Stevens. That's not going to set the world on fire. But Nick Aldis would be the big one. And it does feel a little bit of a shame that Nick Aldis is so heavily carrying the company on his back, just because he's the person that doesn't cross over, isn't really seen as an ex-WWE guy, isn't really seen as just from a different company. He is seen as like the credible person in his own right nowadays. Joe, it's interesting just checking the roster on the NWA website, and I can't see that they've got a roster page, and maybe it's just because obviously with the pandemic the NWA's roster really took a big hit. Point is, there would be people all over the place for Daniel Bryan to wrestle who he's either not wrestled for a long time or he has never wrestled. In WWE, his options are much more limited. Like, who are the people that Daniel Bryan hasn't wrestled in WWE? I will bring up their roster just to discuss this, just so I don't forget someone. So, here comes their roster. Roman Reigns, Bobby Lashley, Sheamus, Apollo Crews, AJ Styles, R-Truth. I think we've seen all of these matches. Now, NXT would be interesting. So, there's people in NXT he hasn't wrestled, but does Daniel Bryan really want to go to NXT? Whilst that would be a huge boost for NXT. Now, the Wednesday Night Wars, if WWE had been like, yeah, Daniel Bryan is going to NXT, if they'd done the right storyline, not just, well, Finn Balor's going back to NXT, because they could say, Daniel Bryan turning up saying, look, I'm the reason why there is NXT today. Like, I was screwed out of winning the first NXT before it became its own independent promotion, but without me, people wouldn't even still remember it. It wouldn't have been a thing. I was the thing that people cared about. When I was fired, I came back and people wanted me back. They didn't care about Wade Barrett, and Barrett's there so they could still play into this storyline, and he's like, I'm here just to take the NXT Championship, and he could even be like, I'm going to take the North American Championship as well, and I'm going to show that I'm the best. Oh my god, Daniel Bryan and Walter. Did we never get that? Walter and Daniel Bryan, that was a huge missed opportunity. if we've never seen that match. But anyway. Won't go over the entire WWE roster just because he has wrestled most of the people that he could have or should have done. There's probably a couple that have slipped through the gaps. Yep, Brock Lesnar, we got that match. I never particularly liked that match. It was good for what it was, but I didn't like the fact that Brock dominated and squashed him, and then it was just the underdog, I'm going to have a bit of a comeback here. And I think Bryan may have even been a heel at the time. But I don't like the idea, because the logic there isn't quite sound for me. If Brock Lesnar beats the hell out of you, then Daniel Bryan isn't making a comeback. He's not going to come back stronger after being beaten up by Brock Lesnar. The logic for that would have Daniel Bryan would have needed to have got something in early. Just to have I've chipped down Lesnar a bit whilst I've got the chance. I've got to be smaller and quicker, more nimble and agile than him to get my stuff in. But then when Brock catches him, then Brock destroys him. Then it could be arguably said that, but Bryan did get that early offense in where he started working Brock's shoulder. So then when Brock went to pick Bryan up for the F5, he just tweaked it or something, which then just gives Bryan the opportunity to come back and get a little bit of offense in on Lesnar. But anyway, I'm just going off on different tangents now. Point is, do I see Daniel Bryan staying in WWE? I think WWE are playing a trick on us. I think the WWE know that Bryan is going to be staying, but they look at history and say, well, look, Daniel Bryan is most popular when he's not here. When Bryan was fired and everyone was chanting for Daniel Bryan, that got the most hype around him. When Daniel Bryan lost to Sheamus and then everyone was chanting yes just in support of Daniel Bryan, that's when he was at the height of the yes movement. When to go on to have the match at WrestleMania, it was because he wasn't being given it. That's what made him most popular then. When he was unable to continue wrestling and had to retire, but then was able to be coming back, then he was very popular. When he came back, people are then just satisfied. And again, it's not that they don't actually like him, but Daniel Bryan consistently is the guy that everyone wants to be there, and they're on his side to be there. And this happens best when he's not there. So Daniel Bryan leaving, his contract ending, is suddenly a big news story this week. It's got everyone speculating, will he go to AEW? But then, when he goes to WWE, it's that Daniel Bryan had the chance to go to AEW, rejected them, and reaffirms in everyone's mind that WWE is the better promotion. So this is a very clever thing you can do, where, going back to the Monday Night Wars, if someone would jump ship, if someone would change which team they're on, then it would be haha, Chris Jericho's left WCW to WWE because obviously he thinks WWE is better. And it'd be oh my god, Lex Luger just turned up on WCW because now everyone's going to be talking about WCW because Lex Luger's turned up and obviously he didn't want to be in WWE anymore. He's gone where the big boys play and so on and so forth. So Daniel Bryan, oh my god, Daniel Bryan's left WWE. He's going to go to AEW and oh wait, Daniel Bryan's in WWE, come back to WWE. Oh, he didn't want to go to AEW. He looked at their option, he looked at their offer, and he turned it down. That's what I think is happening here, and I think it's been the plan all along. Because when Jon Moxley left WWE, it was his contract's ending, and then he turned up, and then he's been a bigger deal in AEW than what he was being used as, or perceived to be, in WWE. WWE can take this formula and just turn it back for themselves, for their own benefit. That Daniel Bryan can even come out and say, well look, I looked at the competition elsewhere, I took a moment to collect my thoughts, and Monday Night Raw is the best competition in the world. I'm going after Bobby Lashley, and it could even be, well, I'm coming to NXT, and if I lost to Roman, then I'm going to prove myself here. And when I'm the NXT champion, then I'm going to beat Bobby Lashley for the WWE Championship, and then Roman Reigns, I'm coming back for you. Set out what could be a plan to go across several months. give a mission statement. I'm coming for the NXT Championship. Once I've got it, I'm going to take the WWE Championship, and then you won't be able to ignore me anymore, Roman, and I'm coming back for you. And if I can't do it again, then I will never wrestle again. Not just for WWE, I will never wrestle anywhere. Then everyone's going to have that huge hype. By this time, it could be WrestleMania of next year, and then he's made. Then, you know, this is a huge storyline. It could even be that Daniel Bryan needs a little bit of time off. So let's just make everyone think that you're leaving, take a few months off, come back at SummerSlam, and once again, this is where you make this storyline so that, yeah, okay, am I going to go to AEW? SummerSlam time? No, I'm coming back to WWE in front of a huge live crowd, and that will be that. So, let me know what your thoughts are. Do you think that Daniel Bryan is going to stay with WWE? Do you think that Daniel Bryan is potentially going to go to AEW? Do you think he's going to go to New Japan? Wrestle in Mexico? Could he go to Ring of Honor or Impact? Do you think he could go to the NWA? Who knows? There's a lot of options in front of Daniel Bryan. Currently, it's all just rumours. Let us know what you think in the comments, either on youtube.com/Extreme Improv. Do check out on every Thursday, there is the Slam Jam Wrestling Show, which is our comedy panel show, which mixes a little bit of improv in with trivia. We do all kinds of promo battles, and it's just a great fun time for wrestling fans to watch. This is the Slam Jam podcast, where obviously we discuss news stories from the world of professional wrestling, and there's a load of great stuff coming up in the near future. So from me, David Postansky, until next time, stay safe, always stay extremed. Ciao for now.